You won't believe what happened the day my grandpa stood in front of our backyard shed holding what looked like a rocket launcher. Yes, a rocket launcher. While our HOA president screamed at the top of her lungs for the bulldozer to push forward. It sounds insane, right? But that's exactly how the fight over a simple wooden shed spiraled into one of the craziest neighborhood wars you could imagine. It started quietly enough. Grandpa had built the shed decades ago, long before the HOA even existed. It wasn't fancy, just a sturdy little outbuilding where he kept his tools, spare parts, and the kind of odds and ends that a man who grew up fixing everything himself could never part with. For him, that shed was a piece of history. For Karen Whitfield, the iron-fisted HOA president, it was a violation that ruined community standards. She gave us notice after notice, stuffed our mailbox with threats of fines, and even showed up on the porch one morning to declare that the shed offended her sense of order. Grandpa wasn't a man who scared easily, and he told her flat out, that shed was here before you, before your HOA, and it'll be here long after. That response didn't sit well. A week later, Karen returned with a clipboard, 2 board members in tow, and an ultimatum. Either the shed was torn down voluntarily, or the HOA would take measures to remove it. Grandpa laughed in her face. I'll never forget how his voice carried, "You bring a bulldozer onto my land, and you'll regret it." Everyone thought it was just bluster. Everyone except me. Karen called his bluff, or so she thought. 2 mornings later, we woke up to the sound of heavy machinery idling on the street. A bulldozer, rented by the HOA, sat at the curb like a tank, ready for battle. Neighbors gathered with coffee mugs and phones out, eager to record the showdown. Karen strutted around in her wide-brimmed hat, barking orders like she was leading an army. And then came Grandpa. He stepped out of the shed, calm as you like, carrying a long, tube-shaped relic slung over his shoulder. The crowd gasped. Karen froze mid-shout. Someone whispered, "Is that a rocket launcher?" Grandpa didn't answer. He just stood tall, eyes locked on the bulldozer, as if daring it to move an inch closer. That was the moment everything changed. The sight of Grandpa with that rocket launcher froze the entire street. Karen's smug grin vanished, replaced with the kind of look you'd expect from someone realizing they might have bitten off far more than they could chew. The neighbors, phones in hand, stopped laughing and started whispering nervously. Some backed up a few steps, worried this was about to escalate into something way beyond a neighborhood squabble. Karen, though, wasn't the type to back down easily. She jabbed her finger toward the shed, her voice cracking but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "That thing is illegal. You can't just wave around weapons in a neighborhood. Move that piece of junk shed, or I'll have you arrested." Grandpa's response was chilling in its calmness. "This isn't a weapon," he said, tilting the launcher slightly so the morning sun glinted off its faded metal. "It's a relic. Decommissioned. Can't even fire. But it looks real enough, doesn't it?" That statement caused a ripple through the crowd. Neighbors squinted, unsure whether to believe him. Karen wasn't convinced either, but she was too proud to admit the fear spreading across her face. "You're bluffing," she shouted. Grandpa slowly walked forward, stopping between the bulldozer and the shed. He planted his boots on the gravel and hefted the launcher onto his shoulder. "Try me," he said flatly. The driver of the bulldozer, who until then had looked bored, suddenly killed the engine and climbed out of the cab. "I'm not paid enough for this," he muttered, retreating down the street. The neighbors chuckled nervously, half relieved, half terrified. That's when the police arrived. 3 cruisers rolled up with lights flashing, sirens cutting the morning air. Officers poured out, hands hovering near their holsters. One of them grabbed a megaphone. "Sir, put the weapon down." Karen immediately pointed toward Grandpa. "Arrest him. He's threatening us with a rocket launcher." She was almost giddy, thinking she'd finally won. But the officers weren't rushing in. They kept their distance, clearly wary of what Grandpa was holding. Grandpa, without missing a beat, set the launcher down gently on the ground and stepped back. "It's a display piece," he explained calmly. "Vietnam-era, hollow tube. I brought it out because I figured that bulldozer needed a little persuasion." The officers cautiously inspected the launcher. After a tense moment, one of them confirmed, "It's inert. No danger here." Relief rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors laughed nervously. Others applauded. Karen, however, turned bright red. Her plan had completely backfired, and now she looked like the one who had escalated things too far. But Grandpa wasn't finished with her yet. Karen's face was a storm cloud of fury and humiliation. She had marched into our yard expecting victory, cameras rolling, the crowd on her side. Instead, she ended up exposed, her bulldozer retreating and the police shrugging off her cries for Grandpa's arrest. The neighbors' whispers weren't sympathy anymore, they were amusement. Some even chuckled outright, and every laugh only made her glare harder. "You haven't won anything," Karen barked, her voice trembling as she tried to regain control. "The HOA has full authority here. That shed is a violation of Code Section 14B, and we will pursue every legal action available." Grandpa folded his arms, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "Funny thing about that," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a weathered folder. Inside were yellowed papers, maps, and stamped deeds. He handed them to the nearest officer. "This shed predates the HOA by decades. It's grandfathered in, literally. It's legally untouchable." The officer flipped through the documents, eyebrows rising. "He's right. These are county records. The structure is exempt." He turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, unless you have contradictory evidence, you'll need to step back." The crowd erupted into cheers and laughter. Karen sputtered, her cheeks flushing crimson, her wide-brimmed hat trembling as she jabbed a finger at Grandpa again. "You can't humiliate me like this. You think you're clever with your props and paperwork, but this isn't over. I'll sue. I'll fine you until you're bankrupt." Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't even step forward. He just looked at her with the patience of a man who'd lived long enough to know that time always reveals people's true colors. "Karen," he said softly, "you don't own this street. You don't own this community. And you sure as hell don't own me." That line landed like a hammer. Even the officers cracked faint smiles. Neighbors clapped louder, some openly filming Karen's meltdown. The humiliation burned her from the inside out, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. Karen whipped out her phone and started filming back, shouting into the camera, "This man threatened us with military weapons. This is harassment. This is terrorism." She was red-faced, frantic, waving her arms as if her rant would somehow erase the facts. Grandpa, meanwhile, bent down, picked up the hollow launcher, and slung it casually over his shoulder like it was no more dangerous than a rake. "If you want to call me a terrorist for protecting my own shed," he said, "go ahead. Just make sure you spell my name right in the headlines." The neighbors roared with laughter. Karen stormed off down the street, bulldozer abandoned, her authority shredded in front of everyone. But even as she disappeared around the corner, Grandpa muttered under his breath, "She'll be back. They always come back." For a brief moment, life returned to normal. The shed stood tall. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. And Grandpa became something of a local legend. Kids whispered about the rocket launcher showdown, and neighbors stopped by just to shake his hand. But beneath the laughter, I could feel his warning lingering in the air. Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, it began again. First came the letters, stacks of them, accusing Grandpa of everything from unauthorized lawn ornaments to dangerously stacked firewood. Then came the fines, thousands of dollars on paper, each one delivered with the smug confidence of someone convinced she'd win through persistence. Grandpa didn't flinch. He kept every letter in a shoebox, methodically stacking them like trophies. "She's building her own noose," he told me one night. "Give her enough rope, and she'll hang herself." The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. A moving truck pulled into the neighborhood, not for anyone moving in or out, but for Karen. She had hired men to haul away Grandpa's shed by force. No court order, no police, just raw arrogance. The neighbors gathered again, outraged but hesitant to interfere. Grandpa was ready. He walked out of the house, calm as ever, carrying not the rocket launcher this time, but a folder of neatly organized papers. "Before you touch that shed," he called out, "you'd better read these." Karen sneered, but when the men saw the official county seals and court stamps on the documents, they froze. The papers weren't just records anymore. Grandpa had filed for a restraining order, and the county had granted it. Any attempt to remove the shed would now be a criminal act. The workers backed away immediately, muttering apologies as they loaded their gear back into the truck. Karen exploded, screaming at them, at Grandpa, at anyone who would listen. But this time, no one stood with her. Even her loyal board members had melted away. And then came the final blow. Grandpa raised his phone and pressed play on a recording. Karen's voice blared out, captured from weeks earlier when she'd ordered the bulldozer forward, "Push it down. I don't care if it's legal. Destroy it." The neighbors gasped. The officers, who had arrived after a call about a disturbance, shook their heads. That recording was all the proof anyone needed that Karen had gone far beyond her authority. Within a month, she was stripped of her HOA presidency. The shed remained untouched, a stubborn monument to Grandpa's victory. And as for the rocket launcher, it went back on its rack in the garage, a dusty old relic with a story that would be retold for generations. Grandpa just smiled and said, "Sometimes the best defense isn't firepower. It's knowing when to show it." If you enjoyed this crazy HOA showdown, don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts on Karen's behavior, and of course, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next wild story. Trust me, the drama is only just getting started.